and it leaves that option open. I think what'll probably start happening with gyms, if they get really serious with enforcing the restriction exemption program, is that they'll just have vaccinated classes and unvaccinated classes. And while that, I don't like the idea of it, there's nothing wrong with it for me in principle, between separating the two, if they are legally obliged to do so. But anyway.
So, I mean, the thing about voting with your feet is, and I believe we had connected right before you booked, or maybe right after you booked your ticket, right? And what that reminded me of is a situation where people will illegally cross the border in the United States, right? They know the risks involved in crossing the border, but the promise of a better life in the U.S. versus staying in Mexico or wherever else, any of the poorer Latin American countries, for them that's a risk worth taking. Crossing the desert, going across over the fence, all these, the security, the border security being there, and you saw this even with Hong Kong and China back, decades ago, where Chinese people were risking their lives crossing into Hong Kong to be in Hong Kong because they knew the opportunity there was greater. You see this with North Koreans leaving Korea, knowing that if they leave, right, North Korea, their whole family is going to suffer, whoever gets left behind. But they still do it, right? And the families who support them leaving, they do it knowing the full risk of what will happen to them if they stay behind. But they want their kids to not suffer in here anymore. And so voting with your feet, I think, is one of the most powerful ways to do things. And I think, in the States, we see it obviously with a ton of startups, VCs, moving into Miami or Florida as a general whole. And then you see it moving away from California to Texas, Miami, like Nashville, North Carolina. Like, they're also moving, and they're voting with their feet because they have more incentive to leave California than to stay there. And I do think it will become more common. I know a few Canadians who've moved to the States as a result of the restrictions here, and I think the North Americans are native North American, not native.
People born here,
people born, people born in North America have the privilege of doing that, right? You can be Canadian, you can move to the States. American, you can maybe a bit more difficult to move up to Canada, but you can move around wherever you please. But anybody else from like a developing world, if you want to move, if you're an Indian and you want to immigrate to the US, oh boy, it's tough, right? Or if you want to move to the UK, it's even more difficult now. So voting with your feet, I think, historically has always been the way that people decide on which cities or city-states will be successful.
Yeah, the only issue that I've found, well, first, I'm 22 and I don't have kids going to a certain school. I don't have a husband who's going to work in a certain place and relies on the city for a career. So it's relatively easy for me to pick up my stuff and sell everything and move. Yeah. But even then, I think the biggest issue that I faced is losing all of my friends. Like it takes a while to build up a network and to build connections in a new city and to develop deep relationships with people. And those are the ones that are the most meaningful. And then like if you pack up and move, then you lose all of those connections you lose all of those connections. It gets a lot weaker. I think the solution to this though is probably to do exactly what you said, which is to go onto Discord, meet new people there, and try and create a network of friends and people based on the internet rather than in real life. And that way your network will come with you wherever you go. It's not as good as a real life network, but if you have friends in every single major Canadian city, then in some sense it doesn't matter where you move, you'll all be together. You'll always have someone there, and you can always meet up in person and eventually start your own city. and buy a tract of land from a government.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point in that moving has the disadvantage of losing connection, real life connection. It's, because it's much easier to make friends in real life than on the internet, right? But that's not to say it's not that it's super difficult to make friends on the internet. It's just that in real life it's more human, right? Because you're interacting, your pheromones are interacting with each other. And there are like very subtle thing that happens when human and human interact. But the other thing is being able to maintain the friendships that you had previously in a different city or wherever else you moved from, and you as in general friendship is the friendships you have, if you're able to maintain it, they compound over time. And the longer you're friends with somebody, the deeper your friendship can go. And not saying that all friendship goes down into the depths of the soul, but I think as a general whole, the longer you're friends with somebody and the more intentional you are with the friendship, the more value is probably not even the right word, the more beautiful the friendship becomes. And that's something where it's hard to put monetary value on a good friend, right? It's hard to say my friend's worth 1 Bitcoin. Because friendship, if you have a good friend, they do way more than making you, giving you good advice, helping you out when you're moving. They do way more than that. They provide deep human connection that's intrinsic to being a human, which if you're not careful and you have multiple friends, if you have like, I have 100 best friends. Well, to me, if somebody says that to me, I think, okay, they don't have any best friends.
Right. And another reason for why it's important to cultivate deep, meaningful friendships with people is because if you don't, then you start to rely on your love interest to fulfill all of the needs that you have for connection. And I think that's a bad idea in the long run, because your expectations for someone are too high. And if you have lots of friends, then you can lower your expectations. This sounds kind of bad, but I think things will work more smoothly in your relationship if you have a network of friends that you can chat with, and you're not relying solely on one person to fulfill all of your emotional needs.
Yeah, I think 100%.
Okay. So are you good with time? Like, can we go for half an hour more?
Yeah, I'm good with time.
Okay, good. Sorry about this. We got kind of sidetracked on cultural appropriation and friends. My fault completely. So Ethereum, how does Ethereum, and just for context, Ethereum is known to be a currency just like Bitcoin, but what it really is a network, just like how the internet is a network. So you can think of it as like a third internet, so to speak. So